Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing amazing today. In this video, we're diving into the latest updates about Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos. You don't want to miss this. So make sure to stay tuned till the end, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the ABC studio, spilling warm gold across the glossy floor. Cameras were being wheeled into place, stage managers whispered final notes, and somewhere beyond the curtain the familiar hum of the live audience built like a heartbeat. Everything looked ordinary, worthy of any regular broadcast of Live with Kelly and Mark. Yet the atmosphere felt strangely hollow, as if the room itself sensed something was about to shift. Kelly Ripa stood at her mark, a stack of blue cue cards trembling slightly in her hands. The bright smile she'd worn for the past 2 decades of live television felt impossibly heavy today. She tried to steady her breathing, but the weight in her chest pressed back stubbornly. She wasn't just hosting a show this morning. She was holding together a life unraveling at the seams. Behind her, in the dimness of backstage shadows, Mark Consuelos took a slow breath and adjusted the collar of his jacket. He looked poised, almost serene, but anyone who knew him well would recognize the tension gathered in his shoulders. Today wasn't about a celebrity guest, or a cooking segment, or a holiday giveaway. Today was the day he would speak on something he had fought desperately to keep private. A diagnosis, a battle, a truth he could no longer hide. When the countdown began in the control room, 5, 4, 3, Kelly forced her practice grin, even as her throat tightened painfully. The cameras clicked on, the applause swelled. For a beat, everything felt normal. But nothing was. A quiet start before the storm. "Good morning, everyone," Kelly said, her voice bright but brittle. "We've got an important show today, a meaningful one." She glanced at Mark. He returned the look with a soft, reassuring smile, one that simultaneously soothed her and shattered her. His hand slipped over hers under the table, a small gesture of unity in a moment that demanded more courage than either had ever needed on camera. Mark cleared his throat. "Yeah, today's a little different." There was a hush in the audience, subtle but unmistakable, like a collective inhale. Kelly felt one of her cue cards slip through her fingers and flutter to the floor, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she turned slightly toward her husband, her partner, the man she adored. His eyes were calm, his voice steady. But she knew the cost of that composure. "For the past year," Mark began, "I've been dealing with some health issues. Things we hoped would resolve quietly." He paused, and in the pause, Kelly's heart cracked again. The silence carried more weight than any words he could ever speak. "It started with fatigue," he continued. "Then pain. Then more symptoms that didn't make sense. Doctors ran tests. We went through a lot of uncertainty. And a few months ago, we finally got answers." Kelly's composure wavered, her lower lip trembling. She blinked too quickly, the first warning sign that tears were coming. The audience watched with absolute stillness. Mark squeezed her hand gently. "I was diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune condition." A murmur rippled through the room, soft and startled. Kelly tried to breathe, but emotion surged up her throat too fast. "We kept it private because we needed time," he said. "Time to learn what it meant. Time to adjust. Time for our family to understand." He lifted his gaze to the camera. "But we also know we share our lives with you. And hiding something this big, it just didn't feel right anymore." Kelly bowed her head for a moment, pressing the heel of her hand against her eyebrow. She wasn't scripted, she wasn't polished. She was hurting, visibly, deeply, but trying to honor the moment. "We didn't want rumors," Mark added. "We didn't want people thinking the worst. I'm okay. I'm managing it. But it's a battle, and some days are harder than others." Kelly inhaled sharply. It was the telltale sound of a breaking dam. Kelly's breaking point. I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking as she pushed a hand against her mouth. "I told myself I wouldn't do this." Tears spilled freely now, shimmering under the hot studio lights. She reached for a tissue, but her hands shook too much to grab it cleanly. Mark shifted his chair closer, placing an arm around her shoulders. The tenderness of the gesture, so simple, so familiar, carried a weight it had never held before. It wasn't just comfort. It was resilience. It was love fighting its way through fear. "You don't have to apologize," he murmured. Kelly tried to compose herself, But the pressure of months of silence, months of late-night worries, months of watching him struggle behind closed doors all came crashing over her. "You've been so strong," she said, wiping tears that kept falling faster than she could catch them. "You've handled everything with grace, and I've been terrified. Every day. Afraid to ask, afraid to hope, afraid of what the next scan or the next appointment would say." The audience sat frozen, witnessing something rawer than any scripted moment this show had ever offered. This was not celebrity drama. This was human vulnerability. Kelly's voice faltered. I love you so much, and seeing you fight this, watching you put on a brave face when you're exhausted, when you're hurting, it breaks me." The confession slipped out like a sob. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder. Mark held her close. "We're okay," he whispered. "We're going to be okay, I promise." Kelly shook her head. "You can't promise that." "Then I'll promise something else," he replied gently. "I'll fight. Every day. I'm not going anywhere." A marriage tested and strengthened. The next few minutes unfolded with raw honesty. Mark explained his treatment plan. He emphasized that the condition was manageable, even if life-changing. He reassured viewers. He reassured Kelly. But it was Kelly's vulnerability that transformed the room. She spoke not as a co-host, but as a wife. "How many nights did you pretend you were okay so the kids wouldn't worry? How many times did you push through pain just to get through the show, or a family event, or, God, just walking down the street?" Mark chuckled softly. "You always knew. Even when I tried to hide it." "Of course I knew," she whispered. "You're my whole world." Her voice didn't tremble on that line, not even slightly. The strength behind her words settled the air in the studio. It shifted the tone from grief to something far more powerful: unity, devotion, hope. Mark's illness was real in this fictional story, yes. But so was the unwavering support between them. And that, perhaps, was the story that truly mattered. The message they wanted to leave behind. After the emotional peak, the show moved toward its closing moments. The teleprompter had been abandoned. The cue cards scattered on the desk remained untouched. Nothing about the broadcast followed the usual plan, and yet it felt like one of the most meaningful episodes the show had ever aired. Mark straightened in his chair. "If there's one thing I want people to take away from this," he said, "it's that health battles, big or small, are nothing to be ashamed of. They don't make you weak. They don't define you." Kelly nodded, still wiping tears but visibly steadier now. "And if you're caring for someone who's going through something," she added, "it's okay to be scared. It's okay to cry. It's okay to lean on the people you love. You don't have to carry everything alone." Mark rested his forehead against hers for a brief moment, a gesture so tender the audience collectively held its breath. "We're in this together," he said quietly. Kelly smiled at last, a real one, tinged with exhaustion but filled with love. Always. After the cameras stopped, the applause at the end of the broadcast was gentle, compassionate, a soft wave of support rather than the energetic cheer of usual episodes. As soon as the cameras cut, Kelly collapsed into Mark's arms, holding him as if anchoring herself. Studio staff approached quietly, offering space while also projecting comfort through their presence. Even the crew members who had worked decades in television, witnessing countless emotional moments, felt the impact of what had just unfolded. This wasn't performance. It was truth. It was fear. It was love. It was the human heart laid bare on live television. Mark ran a hand through Kelly's hair. "You did great," he whispered. She shook her head against his chest. "You're the one who was brave." "We both were," he said. "And now we can move forward." Kelly pulled back just enough to see his face. Her tears had dried, leaving faint salty trails on her cheeks. "You really okay?" He smiled softly. "I'm okay today, and that's enough." Kelly inhaled shakily and nodded. "Then today is enough." He kissed her forehead. "Come on, let's go home." Their battle, their bond. That day became one of the most talked about broadcasts in the show's history, not for scandal, not for shock value, but for its sincerity, for the way it revealed the depth of a marriage tested by uncertainty, for the way it showed that behind the glamour, behind the humor, behind the fame, there were two people holding tightly to each other in the face of the unknown. Mark's journey, ongoing, challenging, but grounded in hope, was no longer a secret. Kelly's emotional breakdown on air became a symbol not of weakness, but of profound love. And together, they reminded millions watching that vulnerability isn't something to hide. It's something that makes us human, something that makes us brave, something that, even in the darkest of times, can bring people closer instead of pulling them apart.